Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Okay, here's the next video in the silicone mold, basic silicone mold to produce a studio model. It says a reusable mold, to be able to get a few pulls from it. If you're careful, you can do multiple casts with it. We've got the first layer of silicone applied. This is the next day. Very, very dry. Everything's firm. The mold is already committed. Okay, whatever I put on from now on is just going to be reinforcement or things like fill with foam in order to reduce draft and eliminate it so the mother will come off. We'll have to do that carefully so it's not has any expansive pressure. We don't want it to flex the rubber, we just want it to hold the rubber in place. So I'm going to be building this, putting on several more tubes of silicone. This is using a regular, straight from the store, GE clear silicone 1, 100% silicone. So we've talked about this the last couple of videos. I'll show some of the video of applying this. It's pretty self-explanatory. You want to go on really thin and develop your build through multiple thin layers. This is probably averaging about 1/8 of an inch over this entire figure, and I'm guessing because this is a figure that's almost 4 feet tall, and then you've got the bird. There's probably 7 to 8 square feet of surface area, and I use 2 tubes of silicone, so that would mean you get about 3 to 4 square feet of surface coverage at 1/8 of an inch per tube of silicone. And that's just a rough rule of thumb. You know, if you go thicker or thinner, you know, it's the idea, the goal is to go as thin as possible and build it through multiple layers so that it cures, because this silicone will not cure. If you just filled a layer here and it was 1 inch deep, you can come back here in 6 months and it'll still be all squishy and not cured. And that can be a real problem with casting, because they can tear or flex, and if they get some air, then they can cure in a deformed manner. So this is a Roma-plastiline, a sulfur clay. I've not had problems with this curing or inhibiting the cure of the silicones that I use, which are both this silicone and GI1000, GL1000 product that's pourable, that's much more expensive. But for a small job, a couple tubes of silicone from the hardware store or the big box store will help you make a really nice mold. So we'll get to work here, and I'll have some video of me doing this and probably skip the basic application that I showed in the last video process, and we'll do a little bit of that, but then we'll focus more on resolving draft with foam. So hang in there and get to work today. I can't emphasize enough how much it matters that you've got a good workspace. You may have a lot of room, you may have nothing. I built this studio, there was nothing here, rotten, falling down building. We tore it down and saved all the lumber that we could to make things like modeling stands and pieces and parts that I ended up using a lot. Made a nice studio that fits what I do, and then when it's time for me to work, I can just come in and work. Now, if you've got a small workspace, just have an organized plan that you can put things away or get things out or set things up to get your mind in the right place, so that when you're going to work, you can work effectively. You're not going to be tripping over the lawnmower or kicking the dog or whatever. So make the most of your workspace. If your workspace is bugging you, pick it up. Things have gotten a little out of hand the last couple of days trying to do all this video, so I straightened up a little bit, and now it's time to settle down and just relax and work. And it'll go a lot better because there's no anything happening that's going to frustrate me or confuse me or get in my way. And it's important to have a space that's yours, that feels like you're in your studio, in your workspace, doing what you really love to do. And so you can make the most of it, because things like mowing the lawn in regular life always require you to do something new too. So make the most of this time, make things fit. Now, I'm still going to go on relatively thin with this silicone. This is starting the second layer. And I don't really need the edges to be built as thick as I do the mold, because they don't have anything to really hold them to tear when I work it. But this doesn't pull off the silicone. If you get a little bit of water on it, it may not hold as well, but this is way more tractable, so this will probably progress a little more quickly. But you still want to avoid the temptation of just putting a big glob in somewhere to fill a hole. That'll end up shutting you down for quite a while. Won't make a stronger mold, and it won't give you a better result. So try to keep it thin, but put your workplace together in a way that really helps you do a good job. Eliminate one more thing, because getting to do this work is hard enough without any easily avoidable distractions. I mentioned yesterday that I was only going to do part of this niche. I wasn't going to do the whole deep niche, because I don't want to have all this extra material, because this will end up being fairly heavy to handle. And because it's heavy and it's brittle, makes it fragile. So took one of my compasses, just set it to where I thought it looked good, and struck a line all the way around the perimeter, faded it up to the end here, because I'm going to have this full depth. And just so I can put the rubber on the background. So I've been working on this. I'll get the same, 3 to 4 square foot coverage, 1, 2, plus 3, and I'm almost to the end. So, this is going on fairly fast and fairly smooth. You'll find that if there's water on the clay, if it pools up in the bottom, that it's very hard to get the silicone to adhere to itself even. If you get water on top of this, you don't want your hands to be dripping wet. You want them to be wet enough that it doesn't grab. And if it does grab, it's best to put a little bit of water on your hands, and then, like I've got a little bit here, and then sort of rub it, peel it off. Because if you try to keep enough rags to wipe off all that silicone, you'll use every rag you own, because they'll be covered and you'll be covered, and you'll get over it really quick. A little bit of water, scrub it a little bit, and it'll come right off. So, but I've done all the way up, done one tube up to his arm in this fold, and then I decided I'd go ahead and start on the scotia, the niche, the ground or the background, and get this married up real well at the bottom here. And it can be deceiving. You got to keep track of how many layers and how much thickness you've got. Now when you're doing this, going over this stuff, you'll have pretty serious draft on these folds initially, where they would be likely to key and get out. It's real easy when you do this to, if this is say this is 1/8 of an inch, and it's 3/16 deep here, it's still going to cure, but you can do that a couple of times, and you can eliminate an awful lot of this draft and make your production of your mother a lot easier because you don't have as many things to fill with foam. Because if you have a lot of overhang, real elaborate stuff, you can go through a lot of foam and a lot of silicone gluing it on. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to plaster the silicone on deep, 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 because that'll defeat the whole project. But if you can do it to a certain extent and just go a little bit thicker in a few spots, you'll end up solving a lot of your draft problems on minor draft, like, you know, potentially around the edge of these wings and a lot of these fold. And I've already done my 3 courses around the outside on the ground or background of the figure. And so it goes up to about 1/4 inch thick. Most of it's, you know, between 1/8 and 1/4. That's plenty. The figure's only had 2 courses. I've been able to resolve some of the undercut or some of the draft just with the silicone, but that's not going to work for the whole project. There's too much here, and if I just keep trying to build it with silicone, it costs a bunch of money that I don't need to spend, and it'll take a long time for it to cure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take some foam rubber, upholstery foam. It's what I've got. We get old pieces when we find it, and whatever works. We take something apart, or you can buy brand new. It's just, you don't have to, because you just don't have to. I've already used this in past projects. You can see where I trimmed down. This was a really big piece, and but I'll cut pieces off that'll fit. So when I put the 3rd course of silicone on here, there'll be a light coat of silicone, a piece of foam that fits, and then a skin of silicone over it. Now, I don't want to have this silicone compressed in a detail like here. I just want to have the silicone in there to support it so that it pulls out easily. If it's compressed, when I take the clay, when I evacuate the actual rubber mold, if this is pressure, it can deflect it and it can mess up a feature. It may not be a big deal on a little bit of a beard, but you know, there's other things where it could be more important. Now, the side of the head here, this is not too bad. This side, I'll probably have to put a piece on here to run it up and make it smooth. So, and then we'll have to develop the mother. So, okay, this is all just sort of trial and error. And you'll cut a piece, and we're going to see how this fits. And we'll try to, I'll probably start this is where you get into, you have to release everything well. Make sure you got soap. Good bond, just get a good surface all over, because obviously wherever you don't get any, it's not going to glue. Try to get that. Usually if you have a lot of tension on it, it'll pull off. And where this one's not pulling off, this is a good fit. Then you just have to work your edges, and I will make sure I don't have silicone everywhere. Both hands are due. If you got a sharp knife, great. If you don't, the easy thing to use is a 4-inch razor blade scrapers, and then you'll have a diagonal So it's real easy to take that diagonal and your sharp knife, you cut the next piece off. See how that works, if it fits. Yeah, see, that's a nice fit right there. And so I'll just put more silicone on here and just keep going. So that's pretty much how you do it. And we'll go over this whole thing. I'll put foam in all these little odd pieces, odd areas around here, so this is nice and smooth. So the plaster mother will lift right off. And you'll understand the mother when I do it. We'll get to that after this is all wrapped up. So just sit back and pay attention. Don't forget to put a little bit of silicone on the end to join it to the previous piece. You'll figure out as you do this that this is sort of like building a puzzle, and use larger pieces, and as you trim the larger pieces to fit, you'll have odd scraps, and the little scraps are better, you'll use them up just to fill because it's cheaper than silicone. But use your big pieces, trim them down, and then use your little waste pieces just to bulk in holes. And like I've got a gap right here, and I'll just wait until I've got kind of a chunk from something else or two that fill it, and it'll work just fine. So, but you see I've got I'm almost through 2 tubes of silicone, and I've got this blended to the ground fairly well, thickened a little bit here where I didn't need to add foam, but then have all these resolved. And I put a little piece right here because I got a little hump there. But if there's draft with this in the mother, this isn't as big a deal because the mother won't press in on it. The idea is you don't want a lot of pressure against it trapped by the silicone in a fragile detail. So, because we'll have to put some blocks on here that are keys to hold it in the mother so that it's aligned properly. But it's coming good. try to fill everything that might have some draft. This is a black mark on the foam, not a hole. If there's a little bit of draft from the foam, that's not a big deal. The mother will pull that, clear that okay. You just don't want draft that's holding a detail that's been cast. So you can see it's covered up quite a bit. So now what I got to do is I've got to make a few keys to put on and to actually hold it in place, to hold the mother in place, so this will register into it. And then I have to be anything fancy, but because this portion will pretty well drop down in. I'll make a few, just some blocks on here to sort of hold it in place. I just cut a few blocks of just square cubes, and then I'll go through and make sure they're fully encapsulated. And these are just going to help the mother register, so I've got somewhere to secure it, make sure that it's all held in place. And you can try to cut them at a taper so that they're locked into your plaster mother. I've not found that's necessarily worth doing because depending on what you use for your mother, you'll end up blowing out the sharp edges. And if they're like a trapezoid, so that they really key in there. You just cut them by hand, you're not going to cut them perfectly square, and they're probably going to key in just fine. Now you could be real careful and try to land exactly perfect and run out of silicone. So you didn't have anything left over. But in all reality, you just as well open the next two, and then instead of trying to save it, just go over it, because there's a pretty good chance you'll find some imperfections in what you've done. And as you when you got a tube of silicone you can't save, you won't be stingy. You go ahead and fix it and make it right. Now at the end of this process right here, I'm going to let this set and cure. I'm not going to rush into doing the mother. It's got to have, you know, I mean, realistically, it should set for several hours. The silicone will continue to cure if you went ahead and did the mother. But because this mold is so big, I'm going to have to make some wooden struts or supports to put in the model, in the mother. The plaster I'm going to put over the top of this, because otherwise I'd have to make it really thick. Plaster doesn't have any real strength in torsion or cross dimension. It's only got a compressive strength. And so if I make this piece of plaster 4 feet long in order to cover all of this and make it viable, it'd have to be really thick, or else it'd be really fragile. If you put like burlap or something like that, and then all that's going to do is hold it together when it cracks, so it doesn't immediately fall into pieces. It's not going to keep it from breaking in the first place. So what we're going to do is I'll make some wooden braces to embed in the plaster of the mother, just like we did with the waste mold, to strengthen the waste mold, except these are going to be left in place to provide added strength to the mother. And then we can manipulate it, handle it, and use it. Now, if you're not doing multiple casts, you know, think about how you can do quick, easy, dirty. This is, that's why I don't usually cast these big models, is because there's a lot of expense. We've got 9, 10, there's at least 16 tubes of silicone we've used at $9 a tube. So, you know, we're $150, $160 just for silicone on this project. And we haven't got to the plaster yet or any of that. So you just have to make a decision as to what you're going to do and what the budget is. Because these are videos to help people understand how this process works. So if they're going to come to the studio to learn how to do it in person, after they've tried it themselves and find out that it might not be as easy as it is on TV, then you'll at least have a familiarity with some of the process. This is a really good way to have your work on hand. This is a really good way to use it in the future. So you got it for future reference. So you got a portfolio for people to see what you've done. And this is how it's really done. You know, this is not some imagination. This is a stone that went to Texas. And, you know, a sold job. It's not a concept that I'm trying to sell. It's already long gone, paid for, everything. So, and I'll probably make a chassis to install in this plaster to make it more rugged, and then I won't have to cast it as thick. I want to make sure I get this square edge pretty well, because that'll tear. That's a real easy place to have a tear, is right along that square edge. And so I can't go ridiculous and make it so thick it'll never cure, but I want to make sure it does have enough strength to hold up. So but that's pretty much it for this. This video, we got it pretty well covered. We're not seeing any bad spots. That's the end of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 18 tubes. So, you know, we're at $9, $8, $9 a tube. 18 tubes, you know, we're in the $180 range, 170. But that's how you do it. So I'll let that cure tonight. Just after 4, it's time to quit for the day. We'll let this set overnight. I'll check it real careful to see if I've got any spots that need addressed tomorrow. It's always good to get away and do something else so you can see what you're looking at, because otherwise you'll overlook things because you've looked at it all day and you don't see the problems. And nobody wants to do ugly work. So this is the end of video 3. It's all keyed up, looking good, and we'll run over it here. Take a look at this. Let this set. Time to go cook dinner. Once again, my name is Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio, showing you how to do reusable silicone molds with plain old hardware tube silicone. Doing a 4-foot St. Francis with Dove. Thanks for coming in.